following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Good morning, everybody. It is Sunday, May 21st, 2023. We are right in the thick of Dynasty draft season, startup drafts, rookie drafts, dispersal drafts. We're talking all that and more today, so take your seats, open up your textbook, kids. It's a Dynasty 101 primer today on Belly Up Fantasy Live.
Rieger getting traded to Minnesota changes nothing.
6'4" guys running 4.4s. These guys don't grow on trees. And a lot of times I'm willing to bet on, especially long term, on the freak athlete.
You don't ever want to overreact to what guys look like in preseason. There's been a ton of preseason all-stars that never make rosters or never pan out. All right, the whistle means it's game time, everybody. Get ready. Let's do this. Good morning, everyone. I am Chase Thornton, coming to you, as always, from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar here, and this is Belly Up Fantasy Live. Like I said in the opener, we are right in the heart of draft season right now for Dynasty. I mean, people are doing rookie drafts. We're doing startup drafts. You might be doing a dispersal draft, and we'll talk about what that means if you're not sure. But it is draft season in Dynasty, and that's what's on our minds this week. We're going to talk about kind of general strategy to think about when you're, especially if you're new to Dynasty. Not everybody has always played Dynasty. Well, most of us in the fantasy football realm have been, used to season long and redraft formats. I literally just within the last 2 years or so started looking at DFS type stuff, and Dynasty, and it's a different mindset. And so there's different things that you kind of have to think about. You have to approach things from a little bit different perspective when you're talking Dynasty versus redraft. So we're going to talk about that today, but we are not alone today. With me, as per usual, and then for as long as we can have him today, we're going to bring in Mr. Kevin Wilson. Kevin, looking good today. How you doing?
I'm doing good, and I am coming to you live from Providence Towers here in Dallas, Texas. And
there it is.
Unfortunately, I wasn't roped into working this weekend. Somebody asked me to because he wanted to go see his mom on her birthday, and so I'm doing that. And he's helped me out before, so I was glad to help him. But everybody that's out here watching, just don't let my boss know this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, good work. Good to have you in here. Yeah, everybody keep it on the down low. No, looking good. Sure. Like you say, you got the Godfather look going on today.
That's right. So don't upset me today because I'm you
might call in a favor.
Might call in a favor, and horse heads, and who knows what might happen.
I'm kind of digging the Homer Simpson workstation vibe behind you, though. I kind of like that. That's cool. That's cool background. I like that. All right. Well, yeah, it's time. Let's crack into my first one here. I'll have one for you today since you're obviously working.
Do have one, have two.
Yeah, we'll have several. Keep it going all day. But
I got welcome the water thing over here, so I'm not bringing on any power. So
Kevin's designating driving today. That's good. That's all right. More for the rest of us. All right.
That's absolutely.
So yeah, we're talking Dynasty and Dynasty theory and Dynasty strategy today. Okay, because like I said, the vast majority of fantasy players come at it from a redraft standpoint. We've all played, season long. A lot of our home leagues are season long, but Dynasty, if you haven't played it before, it's a whole new world. It opens up a whole new way of thinking and looking at fantasy football. Now, for me, the popular saying is always, Dynasty, there's no off season in Dynasty. It's like playing real football. You have to look at it all year round. I'd argue that if you want to be a real successful redraft guy, you've got to be looking at things all year round too. But in Dynasty, especially, you're making moves all year round. You're able to engage in trade talks with league mates. You're able to, play the waiver wire and pick guys up and drop guys all season long, all year long, depending on what your needs are. But it really does kind of boil down to that basic dichotomy theory-wise of short-term versus the long-term. In redraft, in DFS, we're always looking at the immediate, the here and now, win, and what can we do right now? And the focus is on winning this week for sure. And then if you're in redraft, obviously you're trying to, win for this season. Dynasty, I think the best way to always the best way to approach it, whether you're trying to go for it right now and win, whether you're, that you're a few years away, you're always weighing the long-term versus the now, the needs in the now. You can't look solely at, I have to win this week. I have to win this week. If you're not a competitive team, is that what's best for your long-term strategy?
And that right there, Chase, is the hardest thing that I had to learn, because I came late to fantasy football to begin with, but really since I joined Belly Up is when I got involved in Dynasty. And of course, and just about every other, you're playing in fantasy, you're trying to win this week.
Right.
You're trying to win this week. You're into the baseball thing now. And so you're trying to win this week. Well, you can't always have that mindset. Kind of keep it in the back of your mind, but there's other things that you have to learn. I had to learn that.
Right. Because you have to. The biggest thing when you start out, when you're in Dynasty and you've got your roster all put together, however you came into that roster, whether you started up, drafted it, whether you inherited an orphan, whether you did a dispersal draft and jumped in there and you've got that, you always have to be looking at your roster and saying, okay, how competitive am I really compared to the other people in the league? Because, you're always looking to set yourself up to try and compete, but your roster may or may not be capable of winning a championship in any given year. And I know things happen and guys get lucky, and the best team all year doesn't always win the championship. Things happen in week 17.
The same way in real football.
Exactly. Things tend to happen in week 16, week 17, and it's not just the guy that went 10-2 or whatever during the regular season that wins the championship all the time. I get that.
Right.
But do you have a realistic chance?
And he invariably gets hurt right in the fantasy playoffs.
No, right. Or Justin Jefferson got you to and not to pick on the Vikings, but Justin Jefferson gets you all the way there and then kind of disappears in
one ball.
Yeah, from week 15 through 17 or whatever. But yeah, you're always trying to make sure that you've got a competitive roster, or that you've at least set yourself up to try and be competitive in the long term. And even if you're going all in, if you've decided to go all in at some point, I argue you don't want to necessarily completely mortgage the future to try and win that championship, because you're
the Rams
thinking about it
did
in the long
that,
term.
and look where they are now.
Yeah, right. Now, the Rams got their title. They may be paying for that title for a little while here, but you're always talking about weighing the long term versus weighing the here and now. If you've got a roster that you think can this should get me into the playoffs, and I've got a chance that if maybe I get lucky and Justin Jefferson doesn't catch 6 balls this week, and if somehow Ryan Tannehill has a 4 touchdown game, maybe I can. If you've got that kind of roster, my argument is much more to start thinking long term than to try to jump all in and go for it. I like to equate it to I'm a Packer fan, and that, and people who've watched us long enough know that.
If you just tuned in right now, you know that.
There you have it, right? But so I'm also a Bucs fan, obviously being from Wisconsin, also a Bucs fan. The most frustrating thing about being a Bucs fan during the Herb Cole year, Senator Herb Cole, who owned the team before the current ownership group, or actually the two ownership group, manifestations ago. But under Herb Cole, the Bucs always seemed to sell out every single season and were content with abject mediocrity. They never seemed to jump all in and bring enough in to be able to compete at a high level. They always seem to do just enough to make the playoffs every single year.
They were glad if they were the number 5 seed.
Yeah, a number 5 seed was a wildly productive and wildly successful year. But the number 5 seed is still in the lower half of the playoff bracket.
Right. And that's one thing in the NBA you can get away with. The Lakers are a prime example of what we're talking about. Because if they were in another sport, they wouldn't even have made the playoff.
Right. They won the Bucks of the 90s and the early 2000s would have thought that the play-in tournament was like manna from heaven.
Yeah,
We could be even
that's
worse.
not an accomplishment. It's
We could
not
be-
an
yeah.
accomplishment if you make the playoffs in the NBA. Now, if you're in the top 4, okay, we can talk.
Exactly.
After that, no. If you're number 8 seed, I want to hear it. You didn't accomplish anything.
Yeah, because the thing that happened to the Bucks is that, they were in the playoffs every year. Yeah, they were always around or over 500. So they were a successful enough team. And from the ownership standpoint, okay, well, that means, we're making money probably. They weren't paying any giant superstars. They weren't paying LeBron James, Kevin Durant money to anybody, Giannis Antetokounmpo money to anybody before that. But, but what it meant is that they never really had a chance to win a championship. And then on the backside of that, the correlation to that is that they never had a real great draft pick. They were always making deals every year.
The 14 to 16, 17 range. And in the NBA, you're not getting except for you mentioned, Antetokounmpo. I can't even say his name.
Antetokounmpo, yep.
Okay, there you have it. He was a later round pick.
He's a little bit later,
of course, worked out, but you can't always plan on that. If you're outside the draft lottery, you're okay player.
Right. But in Dynasty here,
especially
same kind of thing, where if you're in the middle of the pack and you're never really good enough to seriously challenge for that title, but you're never bad enough to have really good draft picks, or if you're always trading away your draft picks thinking that you're doing yourself good, but you're only keeping yourself in the middle of the pack, then you are just completely stuck in limbo.
That's right.
Okay. So when it comes to Dynasty, you either want to be, 12-team league, you want to be top 3, top 4 at worst, or you want to be down in the absolute bottom 3. Being in that middle 6 is that Milwaukee Bucks 1990s kiss of death of mediocrity, where you're never going to be able to realistically challenge for a title, but you're never going to necessarily have the draft capital to make a giant splash. Your picks
you get frustrated with the whole process, and you probably say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right. And we don't want to be that guy, do we?
No, you don't want to be that guy. And all of a sudden now you've got, in a 12-team league, you only have 10 players in it.
Yeah. No, nobody wants to be that. Don't be that guy. We're setting up long-term, play it long-term, but understand what that means. We already touched on it. You are not always necessarily in position to want to win right now. Now, when we say that, maybe you disagree. My feelings on that is, even if you're in position where you want to be tanking, I hate the word, but we'll use it, tanking. We see it in the NBA. We've seen it in football. We've seen it in baseball. I don't have a better
term either.
Right. Yeah, I don't really have a more eloquent way to put it right now. It's too early in the morning for that. But even if you're tanking, now we're not talking to ruin the integrity of the competition in your league. Every week, you should be taking from the roster that you have and trying to field your most competitive roster.
Right.
Or for the week.
You owe that.
You should be putting a lineup in
to do that. To put your best team on the active starting, roster, and then work around, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have the players to put up there, if you don't have great players to put up there, so be it. It is what it is. But of the guys that are on your roster, no matter who they are, you should be trying to field the most competitive roster for that week, because we've all been there where we've seen a team where we're like trying to make the playoffs or fighting for seeding or whatever. And we look at the rundown of games this week and we see, oh, great. Yeah, Jimmy's playing Fred and Fred's out of it. And Fred didn't even change his lineup, and he's got 3 guys on the bye this week. And darn well, Freddie's not beating Jimmy this week. Yeah, don't do that. That ruins the integrity of the competition in the league. But, in terms of constructing your roster for that season, if you're not ready to compete, there's nothing wrong with getting rid of some of your top aging assets, we'll say, and that's part of our philosophy we'll talk about today. There's nothing wrong with getting some of your top aging assets for future draft pick assets. It means you've got a thinner roster from which to choose on game day. And that's okay, because remember, we're not necessarily worried about winning every week. But within each week, you should be trying to field the most competitive roster. You should be, just like, think about it like the guys in real life, right? You always hear this, like the guys that are on the field, the 11 guys that are on the field on Sunday are not trying to lose the game.
No, they're playing to the best of their ability, because if you're going to get hurt if you don't, first of all.
That's job one right there.
Yeah,
exactly. They're always trying to play to the back, and they're trying to win the game.
Just not, athletes are not wired that way.
No, and they can't be.
Yeah, they're not wired.
If you want to make it that level, you can't be. Yeah.
No, and you wouldn't want those players on your team if they were.
Right. So
yeah, so it's kind of like, we're talking about the NBA, the Mavericks.
No.
Prime example.
From where you're
they
living.
wanted to make sure they kept their 10th, place, and so they didn't play anybody their last 2 games. And it worked out. Unfortunately for them, they got charged, however much it was, which Cuban just says, okay, here's my quarter, whatever it is. But yeah, so you want to make sure that you're playing your best players, and you mentioned about getting rid. That's not the term we're looking for. You moving players for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
If it's older players, you're moving them because you like younger assets. You're not getting rid. Don't get rid of somebody just because you don't want to win or can't win. Make moves that make sense long term.
Right. So you have to look at it, and when you're playing Dynasty now, you have to look at it. You have to look at it on a little bit deeper level than you do on redraft in terms of like guys' ages and things like that. You need to be aware of where the cutoffs are age-wise for each position. And what it means is, like, especially last 2 decades or so, or for a long time in fantasy football, in redraft, it's been a lot of running back early, especially when now, if you get a running back early, you can get a bell cow type back, as opposed to one of these guys that is sharing the load in the backfield, right? But in Dynasty, you need to be cognizant of the idea that the shelf life for an NFL running back is much lower than it is at other positions. So if you are not ready to be competitive this year, next year, maybe 2 years down the road, if you're setting yourself for 2 or 3 years down the road, you should not be focusing on the running back position, because
they won't be here in 2 years anyway.
Right. By the time you are ready to be competitive,
most likely,
you may have guys that are out of the league or too old by now. So one of the best things to do when you're talking about setting yourself up long-term, when you're talking about if you're tanking or whatever else, is to kind of push that running back position to the side. You have to be able to field a roster. So obviously you have to have some running backs on your team, but you want to push those guys aside from the standpoint of making them a priority and focus on positions like quarterback, especially if you're in a super flex league. Focus on positions like quarterback and receiver that last a lot longer in this league.
Especially true of that.
Right. We've seen quarterbacks play well into their late 30s, into their 40s. We've seen it very recently. Tom Brady.
And we're seeing it right now.
Aaron Rodgers is 39 years old.
Your compadre, Mr. Aaron Rodgers, ran off to New York, but
39 years old.
And 39 years old. And, just to interject, because I know you guys talked about the schedule in fantasy football. I don't know if you looked at the Jet schedule. It's not set up for fantasy success early on.
No, it's not.
So I'm just interjecting that because I wasn't able to talk about that last week, but their first, 5-6 games are difficult.
It's rough. It's rough.
So just throwing that in.
and he's on the
It's
forefront of
rough.
everybody's
And
mind
so if
right
you
now
draft
too.
all these New York Jets players, right?
Temper,
So
yep. Temper
but
that back a little bit.
just knowing you may not get the the mileage that you 6 games for the year.
Right. And yeah,
Anyways,
because
that's
they're
where
they're they're on
normal,
the forefront of everybody's mind, being in
little
the they're on the news cycle all the time now. They're New York. It's Aaron Rodgers. It's their wave of people they've brought in to please him and try and make the roster better, and they're officially going for it right now. So they're going to be in the front of everybody's mind. You get to your redraft, or
They
you
got
get
to
to
go
your
for it. Like you said, he's 39 years old.
they have to, yeah. They don't have a ton of time for it, but yeah, their schedule, especially early on, is not
They
set
did
up
not
well
set
there.
up for he didn't set him up for offensive success early on.
No, they did not. But speaking of somebody now liking Aaron Rodgers, though, depending on where you're at in your fantasy, in your dynasty, like roster management and in your timeline, we obviously Aaron Rodgers is a different case because he's been so wishy-washy the last few years. We never know year to year whether he's going to be here or not. But you don't have to shy away from taking a quarterback or having a quarterback in his 30s, because that guy may still have 5-6 years left of productive football, productive high-level football, actually, at the quarterback position. And even receivers can be very effective and high-level effective well into their 30s. Tight ends too, for that matter. But running back is a position that's really youth-oriented. There's very few guys that are Adrian Peterson and can still be wildly effective at 31, right? Post 16 knee surgeries and 8 teams into their career. There's very few guys who age, well at the running back position. So, you need to look at when you're setting up your roster, you want to make sure that you're looking at things like that. And if you're not in a win now mode, you want to look at things like your running backs. Who can I ship off? Who could help somebody win now, or might be a big carrot on a stick for somebody to get a deal done, because you don't have to worry about running backs so much. You're worried about gaining assets that are going to help you 2-3 years down the road. That can be players at positions that last longer, like the tight end, like the running back, or the wide receiver and the quarterback, or it can mean future draft pick assets.
Right.
And you can, so go ahead. Yeah.
When it comes to dynasty, that's the hardest thing to kind of get your hands around is the future draft picks, because you don't worry about any of that when you're playing redraft or whatever else. So you have to make sure that you properly evaluate those future draft picks and make sure that you are ready. If you're looking to deal with someone in your league, and let's say you're new at the hat, so make sure that you're prepared on your end of what you're looking for, what's important to you, and don't let anyone talk you into making a trade that doesn't sound good. Maybe it's too good to be true.
Right. Yep. Okay. Well, he froze up. Yeah.
Time. So.
Yep. No, you're cutting out a little bit,
but my little help.
Helpful hint there. Yeah. No, you are dealing with these people long term in your league. So you don't want to be trying to screw anybody over, but at the same time, you have to make sure that you're not falling for any tricks of the trade either. You don't want to jump on a high flashing name at a position that at the running back position and give up assets that would help you later if you don't truly need that guy. So you need to always be weighing that long term versus that short term, and you don't want to mortgage the future for something that feels good in the moment. Right. Simply because, you can't let go of that idea of win now. And that is one of the hardest things to wrap your head around. So, like I said, if you have to be able to step back, throw your ego aside for a second and say, where am I really at? Am I a top 3 type in this league? Do I have a realistic chance of winning this league and being able to go for it. If not, you do not want to be just treading water there in the middle of everything. You want to be setting yourself up for 2-3 years down the road. And the best way to do that is to sell off your aging assets, especially at running back position, and set yourself up long-term with assets, whether they be young players. And again, we just kind of talked about youth is relative depending on what position you're at. It's not all about birth date. It's not always just about the birth date. The guy who's 21 is not necessarily by default better than the guy who's 23 or 24.
Exactly.
You have to take that into you're not just going youth at all costs. If we want to do that, you can wait around till after your rookie draft and pick up a ton of guys who didn't get drafted, but they didn't get drafted for reasons. You can have a roster full of guys who are 20 and 21. Doesn't mean you're going to be competitive. It's not all about birth date. It's about having youth in the right places, but productive youth in those places as well. Let's take our first break here. We come back on the other side. We'll talk a little bit about specifically how we're drafting in Dynasty and what we're looking for when we're drafting in Dynasty. We'll pivot a little bit there, but first off, we're going to hear from Dan Mater and our friends at Manscaped.
Spring has sprung, and our friends at Manscaped have the best tools for some spring cleaning. They've already helped you tidy up all the nooks and crannies of your body's basement, but this year, Manscaped can help you get the perfect presentation on that beautiful face with the new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. Make sure you look your best this spring by using code BELLYUP20 to get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. It's time to tame your mane with the Beard Hedger Pro Kit. The sun is peeking back out, which means you'll have to show your face in the daylight again. So use the kit to make sure your scruff looks award-winning, whether you got glorious beard flow or some smooth, sleek cheeks. The kit starts off with the Beard Hedger, a waterproof cordless trimmer with a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths, all with one guard. So no more messy drawers full of add-ons. It also comes with the titanium-coated T-blades that are tough on hair but smooth on your face, leading to a single-stroke efficiency that brings satisfaction one stroke at a time. The Beard Hedger is a high-tech piece of art in a travel-sized package with a long-lasting battery, universal charging, and a strong motor. So what are you waiting for? Save 20% off and free shipping when you use the promo code BELLYUP20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the promo code BELLYUP20 at manscaped.com. Focus on the face and use the Beard Hedger Pro Kit for the cleanest look in the game.
There we are. We're talking about getting over there to manscaped.com and using that promo code BELLYUP20. Mine's a little work in progress here in terms of the the up top beard there, but we're getting it. Thanks to Manscaped, I at least have some of the tools to work with for the work in progress. I'm not just flying blind or trying to go at it with a rusty pair of scissors and whatever else I can find in my drawer. So. Yeah, you're getting there. Getting there. All right. So we're talking Dynasty this morning. We're talking Dynasty theories and strategies. First segment there before the break, we were talking about, evaluating your roster and figuring out if you're in Dynasty, am I all in? Do I think I have a realistic chance to win, or do I need to start setting myself up for the future, selling off some assets and some current assets, short-term assets to build my equity long-term? And so, this segment, we want to talk about drafts a little bit. And there's essentially three types of draft that you can talk about when you talk about Dynasty. You can talk about the startup draft, and that's when you're literally just starting a league up. You and 9, 10, 11 other guys, however many, 15 other guys, girls, are starting a league from scratch. And then there's also the rookie draft, and that's if you're in Dynasty, that's going to be your yearly draft. Like in our startup, our home leagues, and our startup league or our redraft leagues, your yearly draft is setting yourself up for the year, and that's when you get to see all your buddies and go in all in. This is the rookie draft is going to be that for your Dynasty leagues. That's going to be your yearly get together. That's going to be your yearly mix and match with the rest of the people in the league. And then there's also the concept, and not every league does this, not every league is open to this kind of idea, but there's the dispersal draft where a certain subset of your league is unhappy with their rosters, and they all vote and decide that they want to have, they want to throw all of their guys back into the pool off of their roster and redraft from however many other people throw their guys into the pool as well. So it doesn't necessarily always mean that the top assets are available in a dispersal draft. You're picking from the 3, 4, 6, however many teams in the league decided they wanted to join in on that. And that's kind of fun. I've been in that. I was in a couple of those last season. I took over some orphan teams that were already had already opted into the dispersal draft. So my introduction to a couple of these leagues that I'm in was a dispersal draft where I got to start from scratch, but not necessarily with the full league at my disposal. So let's start with startup draft strategies. Now, do you personally have any kind of philosophy you like to think of when you go into a startup draft? Is there anything that you're concentrating on in a startup draft, or do you just kind of like to see how the chips fall where they may?
Well, if you're waiting to see where the chips fall, then you're probably, you're behind the 8 ball already.
There you go.
To me. Okay. So we always talk about when you're talking about any kind of fantasy, first of all, what kind of league are you in?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is it super flex? Is it 2 quarterback? What is it? IDP, whatever, so you got to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, you better know the rules of your league. Because not every league has the same rules, as far as touchdown is, how much an interception is, or whatever it might be. And so you need to know that before you even get to the point where we're drafting. If you don't know that, then I don't know why you're playing fantasy, first of all. Second of all, because you're not doing yourself any favor. Okay? So then, if you can find out, if it's a startup draft, what is my draft position?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find that out as early as possible, because then you can start doing yourself some mock drafts. And let's say you're 7th, you can put yourself at 7th out of 12 or however many there are. And every single mock draft you do from there on out, you're number 7. So you get a pretty good idea of what you get at 7, what you get when it's coming back to you. So, but it always comes back. And this is true of not just football, but baseball, basketball, whatever fantasy you're in. Know your league. And if possible, know your whoever it is, if you can. If you're playing somebody that lives in Seattle and you live in Atlanta, that's kind of hard to do. But if you can get a sense of, your league mate, do that. But first and foremost, know the league you're in and know the rules before you even do anything else.
Oh, and I think that's a great point. And again, like you said, that's not necessarily a ton different from redraft strategy. Just because we're talking dynasty doesn't mean you throw out everything you know about fantasy, right? But if you don't know the scoring rules of your league, and if you don't know the roster construction of your league, the daily lineup requirements, you have no way of knowing how to properly value each position and guys then within those positions. You have to understand, is a passing touchdown worth 6 versus 4? If a passing touchdown is worth 6 versus 4, now you're looking much more at guys that throw the ball as opposed to just the guys that are mostly the runner quarterbacks. If it's tight end premium, okay, maybe you want we all want Travis Kelce as our tight end on our team. But if it's tight end premium and it's a true premium, 1.5 points per reception as opposed to 0 or half point per reception, whatever, or they get 1.5 times their touchdowns or whatever, or yardage bonuses. If it's true tight end premium, now that changes your calculus in terms of how you value players at other positions vis-a-vis the top tight ends. You need to know your scoring rules and your daily lineup construction to properly value guys going into that draft. I agree completely.
Right. So, example of that is if it's super flex, if you don't come out of the first 3 rounds with 2 quarterbacks, you're already behind the power curve.
Right.
So, when I first got into a dynasty league and I was just over here and I was just drafting it was a regular redraft. And then when I got to the end, I had 2 quarterbacks on my team. And that's it. If you have 2 quarterbacks on your team on a dynasty, you fail.
Right.
Okay? Because when the bye week comes around, now what are you going to do? So I was battling uphill. I didn't follow my own advice and make sure I knew what the heck I was doing before I got involved. So, because somebody said, "Hey, you want to jump in?" And I jumped in.
Yeah. Hey.
And so it didn't go well. All right. So that's exactly that is a prime example of what I'm talking about. If it's a super flex league, because in a regular draft, quarterbacks, you're not taking a quarterback till all the people that are the experts say don't draft a quarterback before the 6th round.
Yeah, wait on quarterbacks. Single quarterback league redraft. Yep.
Yeah. When you're dealing with actual people, that goes out the window in the 3rd round. That has been in my experience. I've been involved in. Quarterbacks are coming off the board by the 3rd, but that's just real people, whatever. But in dynasty redraft, if you don't, like I said, if you don't have 2 quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds, it's not working.
Right. Yeah. You've got to be aware. You've got to be aware of things like that because the rules of your league and the rules of your roster construction and how many roster spots do you have overall? How many guys do you have to start on Sunday or start on by Thursday? But
do you have to start each week? Wide receivers, let's say.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Which I've never seen that before until I joined this other league and they had 3 starting wide receiver positions. I'm like, okay. Yep. So now you're going to have to draft twice as many wide receivers as you do running backs, let's say.
Right. Yeah. If you've been used to playing with 2 and a flex, and the flex, which can come from any of the 3, positions other than quarterback. If you've been playing just that way, now all of a sudden receiver's a little bit more important than it had been to you previously. So understanding those rules completely. Right. You need to understand going into a startup. Are you trying to compete right away, or are you more so trying to look long term? And that's where you'll hear this term, and maybe you've heard it and you haven't understood what it meant. And I mean like the royal, not the royal you, but the collective here. The productive struggle is one philosophy you can take into your startup draft, and it's an attempt to set yourself up long-term by essentially, for lack of a better term, punting on year 1, right? Productive struggle is a way to go into your first draft, your startup draft, and set yourself up, set your roster up for long-term success and acquire future assets. And it's almost like being in rebuild mode right from the beginning. But it's a soft rebuild in that you're going to want to take some of these high named players at the right positions early. You want to set yourself up at quarterback for the long term. You want to set yourself up a wide receiver for the long term. You may not even deal with running back for over half of your draft. You may wait on that, but you're setting yourself up with younger assets. You're trading back and acquiring future drafts or more drafts in that startup draft. But the productive struggle in terms of setting yourself up with a good foundation and some future assets. And like we talked about, it's hard to do, to go into it thinking, I'm not necessarily looking at winning this year. Is that something that you can even do?
I don't think it
was that hard to do?
It is hard to do because I think you go into it and you have a philosophy at the start of the draft. Okay. Once I got some vacuuming going on over here. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Anyway, so
that's all right.
Once it gets started, kind of like in a war, you have to pivot sometimes, right? Because maybe everybody is valuing all these young players, and there's somebody that's 28 years old who is just hanging out there, who is an excellent player, and they're like, I'm looking for young talent. That's all I'm looking for. But he's sitting there and he's a great player. Take it.
Right.
And so, all of a sudden you may not have been thinking about, I'm going to compete this year, but now you've got players on your team who are in their primes for this year. And so now you maybe later on in the draft, you're starting to change how you're looking at it, because you've got players now that can get you possibly to the promised land. And so it's kind of like in a war, you've got your battle plan and the bombs start falling. And then,
Yeah.
right. And all of a sudden, well, that battle plan is not working. So you better be able to adjust what you're doing and not just sit there and say, well, I'm drafting running backs and that's all I'm doing. And that's what it is.
Like Mike Tyson said it. Everybody got a plan until they got punched in the mouth.
That's right.
Yeah. Everybody's got one.
Yeah. Everybody's got a plan until you're in the ring with Muhammad Ali, and next thing you know, or, something like that. And you're against the ropes. So what are you going to do?
And it's hard to weigh that when you're in a dynasty startup draft. If you went in with a philosophy and with a plan, and if you start to execute that plan, you don't want to necessarily, I don't think you don't want to jump off of that strategy if you've really invested in it. It's kind of the same way that you hear guys talk about the zero RB strategy in redraft. Oh, I'm going to do zero RB. I'm going to do zero RB. I'm going to do zero RB. And then they take a running back in the third round. And it's like, no, you're not doing the strategy. You're not actually taking care of it. Now, yes, if every time you're up to draft and Christian McCaffrey falls to you and Bijan falls to you and Eckler falls to you somehow, and that's one thing. But if you set yourself up and if you started to try and execute the zero RB strategy and you don't go all in on it, you're not doing zero RB. And what you've done is you may have set yourself up for a mishmash of mismatched parts there on your roster. If you're going to go into a startup draft,
you don't want to go so far afield that you're now not of your draft.
Right. You can come into a startup draft and think about it like a season long draft. And you can just go for upside in the here and now. You're looking at 2023 and that's what you're looking at. And you're really going to try to win it. And it's fine to do that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. You can come into your draft thinking, okay, I'm going to productive struggle. I'm not necessarily going to, if the season plays out and it presents itself that I'm up top, great. But I want to set myself up long-term and I'm not necessarily worried about this season. That's great. That's fine. There's more than one way to win. The thing I caution people about in a startup draft is that.
So that's why you need to do research to find out what's important to you.
Yeah. You need to do your research.
What's your philosophy? Is it zero RB, which I've never done that either. So don't look to me for any, tip on playing zero RB because I ain't giving you any.
Right. But you need to know what you want to do going in. And you need to commit to that. You need to be committed to it and then execute your strategy. And, and it's tough. It's tough. It's a different way of thinking about things. And you have to tell yourself that, and you have to be aware of that. It's season long. Like we said, you go into it and you think, oh man, I want to win. I want to win. Productive struggle or
here. So
yeah. And like we said, it doesn't mean that you're drafting only youth. It doesn't mean that you're drafting only, wide receivers and quarterbacks. But what it means is you're aware of what you're doing and cognizant of things. Now, in a startup draft, one of the ways you can productive struggle here. Whoop, there he goes. One of the ways you can do that in a startup draft is you can trade back, you can trade out of your startup draft rounds. And one way to do that, what you want to do is you always want to be trying to gain future assets from that. One rule of thumb that I kind of have followed and that I've heard, other guys talked about with other guys following. In a startup draft, remember, you've got deeper rosters. You've got rosters that are going to be not just 15 guys long. not just 15, 16 slots. You're going to have 20, 25 slots on your dynasty rosters as Kevin comes back to us. You're going to have more roster slots available to you in a dynasty league. So,
Am I back?
Yep, you're back.
Okay.
You're drafting more slots, and in a dynasty, a lot of times you may not be talking about having to deal with kickers and dealing with defenses, and that'll come up in a few minutes as well. But you have to be sure that you're filling out your roster with these 20, 25 guys. You can choose in a startup draft to trade yourself back. And one rule of thumb that I've seen to follow is that in the first, say, 7 rounds, first quarter of your rounds, or the first third of the rounds of your startup draft, if you are going to trade your pick for the startup draft and trade yourself out of that spot, you want to be trying to net at least a first round rookie draft pick in order to move off of that spot. So if you're going to trade for instance, if you're going to trade your first round startup draft pick, you want to get back at least a second round startup draft pick and a future first rookie draft pick. If you want to trade out of the second or third round, if you want to trade out of your spot there to somebody else, you want to only drop back a round and a half, 2 rounds or so at the most, and net yourself a first round rookie draft pick, because those picks at the beginning of a startup draft are valuable. Like you said too earlier, if we're talking startup, they can be even more valuable in terms of being able to get those top quarterbacks and set yourself up long term. So you want to be sure that you're coming away from that with valuable assets, not just giving those picks away. Dropping back around, picking yourself up an extra second round, you're still getting good players of value there. Netting yourself a future first round really starts to fill up that war chest that you're trying to build in terms of your assets and tradable assets and movable assets. So in the first quarter to a third of your startup draft, if you're going to trade down or out of your current spot in that startup draft, always try to net yourself a first, which means you may not be able to trade with the same guy 3-4 rounds in a row. Obviously, you may have to try talking around to the league, but I like that personally. I like that idea personally of making sure that you are not just obviously giving away those picks. How many dynasty startup drafts have you had to be a part of?
1 second.
Yep. Nope. Working.
Ready.
All right, look at that, folks. We're right in there. We're seeing how the sausage gets made there.
What?
All right. You there? Oh, there you are. There you are. You look like you're there.
Okay, so answer your question. I've been involved in 3 startups.
Okay. So 3 startups. So how did those drafts play out for you? I mean, were you playing with a ton of what? Because I've been in several startup drafts myself. I've been in probably 3 or 4 myself here just in the last year. And you can be dealing with some guys in your league are really hyper aggressive and they want to jump out there. My thing to think about in a startup draft, though, if you want to be really aggressive and super aggressive and go for it, you need to literally sell out and do it then. Because if you do not, keep in mind, 10-team league, 12-team league, 16-team league, 20-team, it doesn't matter. However big your league is, there's only going to be one team that wins. So if you're going to mortgage your future on the startup draft, you need to sell out and do literally everything you can to win that year. And if that means packaging first rounders and future first rounders to try and move up, whatever, you need to do that. You can't go at it halfway. Only one team is going to win every season. Only one team is going to win, and that's why you're trying to set yourself up to be competitive long-term and be a top team long-term. If you sell out for this season and it doesn't work, you may not be able to get back to that situation. You may not be able to get back to that top 2 or 3 in the league and be that competitive for several seasons by now. And as much as we maybe like to gloss over this fact and the idea of this, the vast majority of dynasty leagues honestly don't last in perpetuity. They for whatever reason fall apart or disperse or whatever after about 3 to 4 seasons. So if you're always thinking 4 seasons ahead, 3 seasons ahead, and you're never trying to go for it, you kind of get yourself, you've virtually guaranteed that you're not going to win it. Okay. That's like I said, you're always trying to balance the short term versus the long term, but only one team is going to win. If you are going to sell out and go for it, you need to sell out and go for it. You can't have emotional attachment to that first round pick 2 years from now. If you can pick up a first round pick from a guy, you can't be afraid of packaging 2 first rounders for a higher first round. You have to go for it right now. And so, when you're in a startup draft, you need to go into it with knowledge. Just like every draft, you need to know your rules, know your roster construction, know your starting lineups, understand that. But then you also have to go into it with your philosophy and be willing to commit to your philosophy. Am I going for it this year? In which case my rookie draft picks from the future are fair game and I can trade them, and I'm going for the highest value assets for this season, treated almost much more like a season long, like a redraft. Or am I going to try and set myself up long term? Am I going to product or struggle? Am I going to commit to that and set myself up for more sustained long-term success at the expense of the instant gratification, the younger generation? And now that I'm in my mid 40s, I can talk about the younger generation like that and tell people to get off my lawn. But are you going to try and set yourself up for that long-term success? So that's the startup draft. Like we said though earlier, like every year is going to be the rookie draft. You're going to have that rookie draft, and that's going to be your fun time with your buddies. That's going to be getting together and seeing the draft board and drinking some beers and talking your smack to each other in person. Your rookie draft now. This is where there's a debate here about drafting for need versus BPA. The Packers have been a team, in real life, my team, and it's not a secret. They've been one of those teams that always seems to rely on the idea of BPA, best player available. When they come into a draft, they are not necessarily saying to themselves, oh, we really need a right guard this year. And so when they're up at slot 22 on the draft or wherever they're at, oh, okay, who's the best guard on the board? And we're taking that guy. They've been much more not prone. They've just been much more committed to taking whoever's the best player on the board and letting positions and things shake out later. As opposed to, like we said, coming into a draft and saying, okay, we need this position and who's the best player at this position. Now, sometimes it shakes out perfect. Sometimes you have the first pick in the draft and you need a quarterback and the best player on the board is a quarterback. Great. It's wonderful. Sometimes the best player on the board is a defensive tackle and your biggest need from a team standpoint is a defensive tackle. Boom. That's beautiful. But best player available versus drafting for need. And you need to understand, and again, continually evaluating your roster, seeing where am I at? Am I competing? Am I in tank mode or struggle mode? Okay. And that's where now you go into a rookie draft. Am I drafting for need because I'm trying to strike while the iron's hot and I got to do it right now? Or am I drafting just best player available, taking the talent and trusting that I'm building myself a strong base of my team for down the road? I would argue that it's always in Dynasty. unless you are in a real specific situation, like I said, top 2 or 3 guys, and you think you can go, I'm always of the opinion, take the talent over the position of need necessarily. Remember, we're talking about unknown quantities. We're talking about rookies. We don't know. We all have a fairly good idea that Bijan Robinson is going to be a very good NFL running back for quite a while, for as long as running backs can be good. We all think we know that about Bijan Robinson right now, and I hope for his sake he is. I hope for his fantasy manager's sake he is. Good for him, and I don't wish him any ill. But we don't know. They're unknown quantities, okay? Just because you think that you're coming into this, oh, geez, I need a receiver, doesn't necessarily mean that the receiver that you want to take or that any of the receivers in this class are going to be the guy that puts you over the top. So if you get up, if you're the 10th pick in your draft because you had a pretty good season last year and you think, oh man, I'm only one receiver away. When it gets to your pick, if the top talent available on the board isn't a receiver, and if there's no receivers that can have a reasonable argument made for being the best guy on the board, what good is it doing you to pick up a receiver that may or may not be anything this year? Even if he's a good prospect, if he's on a team where he's not going to be a top 2 or 3 option this year for whatever reason, how have you helped yourself short-term or long-term? You needed a receiver before, you picked up a receiver, and it's not going to be a guy that's going to be able to start for you. You're no better off or worse than you were before, right? But if the best guy on your board, if it's a super flex league and the best guy left on the board is a quarterback still, by far, and but I've got 2 starters and I've got a good backup, I've got a good 3rd and 4th quarter. Take the value, take the talent, build a strong volume and foundation on your team, and let the position things shake out later. Now, okay, great. You've got extra quarterbacks. It's a super flex league. They're valuable. Go trade somebody else. Pick up a pick and a receiver now and plug that guy into your lineup, and you're farther ahead than you were. Plus, you've got a young quarterback you can use for the future. In Dynasty, I am of the opinion that you want to always look at the talent and roster depth over immediate need. How many guys going? I mean, there are some great talent in this 2023 rookie draft right now, but how many of those guys are legitimately going to be able to push you over the top? It's not much. Like I said, it's a very specific set of circumstances that gets you in position to win in any dynasty league in any given season. Okay. And so unless you are really in that narrow lane of guys that can compete, people who compete, you need to be looking at that idea of not sabotaging your future for the present. So there's my rookie draft kind of philosophy there. Last thing we'll talk real quick about before we hear our second break here, dispersal drafts. Dispersal drafts, like we said, people who, it's 4 or 5, however many guys in the league, people in the league want to kind of throw all of their chips back on the table and choose from there. And those can be fun. The thing to keep in mind is, the people who are going into these drafts probably haven't been the guys that are winning the last couple of years. So there may or may not be guys like Josh Allen available, Patrick Mahomes. They may not be. Teams with those guys maybe aren't in the dispersal draft. But the nice thing about the dispersal draft is that you do get a chance now to kind of reset and retool your roster. One of the things to think about that some guys kind of gloss over or don't think about right away. Going into the dispersal draft, you have to kind of ask yourself the same questions as a startup draft. Do I want to try and do I think I can come out of this competing right away? Or again, am I going to improve my situation from what it was, but am I setting myself up for the future? One of the things to remember in a lot of dispersal drafts is that not only do the players get thrown back into the draft pool, but the rookie draft picks that those teams have acquired or own, those picks get thrown into the pool as well. So now when your turn comes up in round 1, you have the option of not just taking a quarterback, a running back, a receiver, or a tight end. You have the option of taking someone's first or second round pick from 2024 or 2025 in some cases, even depending on how far out your league looks and assigns those draft picks. So when you're in a dispersal draft, you need to go into it and understand too, again, your philosophy of whether I'm trying to compete now or long-term. And if you want to try and compete long-term, you need to occasionally skip the players on the board and take a future rookie draft pick so that you don't go into next offseason with absolutely no rookie picks and no way to kind of maneuver around in your roster building. You need to make sure that when you're doing a dispersal draft, you're aware of the rookie picks that are available and how they play out versus your philosophy and whether they're actually going. If everybody else is ignoring them, snatch them up. Take the opportunity. Take the opportunity. Likewise, just because, hey, if those picks are disappearing, don't just jump on and grab a third round pick just because there's no draft picks available anymore. Okay, fine. If the draft picks have been going, that means there should be more guys on the board for you. Maybe you're looking at a much more win now situation. So just in a dispersal draft, one of my main pieces of advice would be to make sure you're looking at how the rookie drafts are shaking out. Let's take our second break real quick here at the end, and then we'll wrap up our quick segment number 3, talking about how we're going to address trading and waivers in the dynasty landscape versus redraft here.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan from No Credentials Required to talk to you about one of our newest partners at Belly Up Sports, SeatGeek. Yeah, live sports is great on television, but the feeling of being at the arena is a priceless experience. That's why our friends at SeatGeek are there to help you find the best tickets at the best prices. Not only can you get tickets to sporting events, but you can also get tickets to concerts, comedy shows, musicals, and more. Search for your desired event now at SeatGeek.com, enter promo code BellyUpSports at checkout, and you save $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek. Life's an event. We have the tickets.
Life's an event. They have the tickets, so go get the tickets. Use that promo code BellyUpSports and get yourself to a show, get yourself to a game, get yourself out there and live a little bit. You don't have to sit at home behind the computer like some of us have to work. All right. So last segment here, let's talk real quick about trading and waivers and how those operate in Dynasty. Trading in Dynasty is real similar, obviously, to trading in your redraft leagues as we crack open number 2 here for the day. But one thing I like to caution people, I would hope you're operating this way anyway, whether you're in your home leagues, in your season long leagues. Remember that you're not just trying to win at all costs, and you're not just trying to screw over everybody else and get the best, get the best thing in every draft, in every trade. You are looking obviously to benefit from a trade. The best trades, the best way to make a trade, the best way to ensure that you can continue to trade in your league is to always remember that there's a person on the other side of that deal and that the best deals benefit both parties. Okay. It doesn't mean that you always win every trade in terms of like the raw numbers of, oh, well, the trade calculator said that I gave up 57 points worth of value here and I only got back 43 points worth of value. It doesn't mean that you didn't benefit from the trade. It doesn't mean it wasn't a good trade. It means that according to somebody's random ass trade calculator, you gave up more points than you got back. But if you have a complete surplus of running backs and you have no room to use them all in your starting lineup, but you really needed a receiver and you traded away a fairly good running back, but you got back a receiver that made your overall receiver core better, made your starting lineup better, trading from an area of, which you're always trying to do, trade from an area of surplus value and receive back an asset in an area of negative value or lower value for you. If you can do that, then you have done well in the trade. You don't always have to be the guy or girl that comes away with the most points, as according to Fantasy Pros, draft calculator, or according to whatever the 4 letters draft calculator, or Dynasty nerds, or whoever. You don't have to come away with necessarily the most points on the board to win that trade. Okay. So don't think of it that way. But you're always looking the best trades, the best way to propose a trade, the best way to conduct yourself in trades is how can we really benefit both sides here? If you come at somebody with a deal that's obviously not going to help their team and only help yours, it doesn't matter what kind of case you want to make for that. Hey, why don't you give me the number 3 quarterback in the entire league for my, 5th string wide receiver that's not even a number 1 on his own team? Nobody wants to make that trade. You wouldn't make that trade. Why would anybody else want to make that trade? And even if you pull it off, okay, great. You're the fantasy, bro, and that's great. Good for you, but really, come on. You don't have to be the guy that squeals your tires and revs your engine at the stoplight. Nobody's impressed. Nobody's impressed that you somehow screwed over another guy in the league and completely raked him over the coals on a trade. It's not worth that. We're still dealing with people. Your league mates are still people. They're trying to win too. The best way to trade is to make relationships and maintain relationships, benefit both sides of that. Okay. So in Dynasty, especially now, you're talking about wanting to be able to trade in the future, and you're trading draft pick assets, and you're trading players in the future. You're setting yourself up for long-term relationships with these people. Don't be that guy or girl that's always trying to, come out of every trade completely lopsided and winning. Because you're gonna hurt people's feelings. You're gonna make people angry. You're gonna piss people off. Be frank. And B, you're not gonna be able to pull off many trades because you're going to get that reputation. People are going to think, I'm not dealing with Thornton. He's always trying to, get you to give up your best players and trade you back his backup punter. You don't want to be that guy in the league. Okay. Waivers in fantasy, in Dynasty fantasy, waivers are a different animal than in season long. Season long, say that your home league is a 1 quarterback league and 10, 12 teams. There's a good chance you can pull a guy like Ryan Tannehill or Mac Jones off waivers. Oh, bye week's coming up. I need a quarterback. Who's got a good matchup? Okay, yeah. I'll take a shot on Baker Mayfield this week because he's got a good matchup. Whatever. You can pull guys like that off of waivers in season-long redraft. In Dynasty, remember we said you're not always dealing with kickers and tight and defenses. You've got fewer positions on the team, but you've got more roster slots. So what it means is the wide receiver 5s, the wide receiver 4 and 5 types that you may or may not necessarily be rostering in, they may not be worthy of a roster slot in a redraft league. Those guys are gone. Those guys are off the board in Dynasty. And where, week 4 comes up and starting running back for X team gets hurt, you can go on, big waiver pickup article this week is going to be his backup is the big guy to go get. That guy is not necessarily, and not only not necessarily, he's most likely not available on waivers in Dynasty. So you need to be digging deeper for waivers. And plus you're dealing with waiver budgets, you may be dealing with $1,000 for the season. And how much do I really want to spend on this guy right now? Waivers are a different animal. It's a different animal in Dynasty. You need to be looking deeper, trying to pick up guys and look at guys who maybe have future value, not necessarily immediate value. It's going to be very rare that a guy with immediate value is available on the waiver wire in a Dynasty league. You might have run into it last season with Brock Purdy. Being Mr. Irrelevant, being a barely drafted quarterback in terms of the league meant that he was not getting drafted in a whole hell of a lot of leagues in fantasy, period. And it might have meant, he went into the season as the 3rd stringer. He didn't even go into the season as like a a backup that we had on our radar even. So you might have been able to find Brock Purdy on the waiver wire last season. Those opportunities are very few and far between in Dynasty. So you want to make sure that you are looking at the future, looking at young guys, looking at maybe a little deeper plays, and then you need to budget yourself accordingly. And when that opportunity does come up to get a guy with immediate value, you may want to, especially if you're in win now mode, you may want to dive in all in on that guy because listen, you got $1,000 to spend this season. I just talked about it. There may not be opportunities to spend that money in a whole lot of places throughout the season. If you're in a league that gives out that waivers run on one day, but then there's free agency the rest of the weekend, you may not have to spend a ton of money on Friday to get, to pick up a guy off the waiver wire, to pick up a rookie third string running back or whatever. But if a guy with immediate value comes up, might be worth it to literally jump all in, spend a good portion or all of that fab on that guy, because those guys don't come up often because they're just simply not out there. They're not available. The math doesn't allow those guys to be available as often in dynasty leagues. So remember when you're trading, remember when you're looking at waivers, again, go back to your overall philosophy, your overall strategy. Where is my team at right now? Am I competing? Am I setting up for the future? Then make your thoughts accordingly. Make your moves accordingly. That's going to do it for us today. That's going to wrap it up. I'd like to thank Kevin Wilson for showing up, for showing up to his second job from his day job. We hope everything's going well for him there, and I appreciate him stopping in and soldiering through it for as long as he did there. Reminder, get yourself over to bellyupfantasysports.com. You can follow Kevin on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. We'll be giving our thoughts there. Kevin especially is dealing with fantasy baseball right now. So if you're into fantasy baseball, get over to Belly Up Fantasy Sports, get on Kevin's Twitter, check that out. We've got all kinds of articles, coming out every week, not just we got Kevin's waiver wire article that comes out weekly. Ian Lemersal's doing good things over there as well. There's a ton of great content on fantasy baseball going on right now. There's also fantasy football content, dynasty content, player evaluations, and that kind of thing going on right now over there as well from myself and others. So bellyupfantasysports.com for all of your fantasy football and fantasy sports needs as well. Wish me luck. I'm coming into today down a little bit in the Belly Up Fantasy Baseball League, but I'm within striking distance, and I've got a couple of decent pitchers going today. So let's hope I can make up some ground there. I'm only about 12, 15 points down. It's been a good week, but the Mets postponement yesterday kind of bent me right over. So wish me luck on that. Otherwise, get yourself over to bellyupfantasysports.com. Check out all the great other podcasts, all the great content that's over there. We will see you back here. I know it's a holiday weekend next week, Memorial Day weekend, but we will be right back here, same bat time, same bat channel, talking about all of the things that you need to do to win in your fantasy league. So until next time, everybody, we appreciate you being here with us. And we're going to say Slanjava for the week.